Well, welcome to Observations for Our Time. My pleasure to be with you. We've got Scott and Kirk both with us today. How are you fellas?
Just great, thank you.
I'm doing fantastic.
You know, I just noticed a news item that was reported. Dateline is New York. It's being conveyed by Reuters. This is this is amazing. The Defense Department's Inspector General in a June report said that the Army, that would be the U.S. Army, made a $2.8 trillion wrongful adjustments to accounting entries in one quarter alone in 2015, and $6.5 trillion for the year. Yet the Army lacked receipts and invoices to support those numbers, or simply made them up. Now, we're not talking about, if you, Scott, were to file your income tax and misrepresent your earnings by $1,000, you are going to be fined. And if you don't pay your fine, they're going to send your sorry behind off to jail. And if
that feels like robbery, by the way.
Yeah, that would be if you misrepresent your earnings, as much as $1,000, you're in serious trouble, and you're going to be lambasted and harassed and fined and possibly even receive a criminal charge, which will send you off to jail. The U.S. Army, that institution that America is somehow convinced is providing its freedom. That one that's providing your safety by making a mess of the world. That institution is the very one that we salute and thank for their service and put our hands over their hearts and sing the national anthem to. Well, I don't, but other people do. Mm-hmm. They recorded $6.5 trillion of fraudulent spending. In the past 12 months, $6.5 trillion. I mean,
just in the last year.
How can you make a $6.5 trillion error? I mean, the U.S. national debt now is about $20 trillion, and the Defense Department publicly, their public budget, acknowledged budget, is about $650 billion a year. And we don't really know how large the clandestine budget is, but it's estimated at about $250 billion a year. So that takes you to just shy of $1 trillion. How do you make a $6.5 trillion error in a year on $1 trillion budget?
That reminds me of something that happened here in Minnesota. We were told for a long time that we were going to have like a $300 million deficit, right?
Uh-huh.
After the tax season went through, all of a sudden we had $1 billion surplus.
Oh.
And I was just like, I remember asking my dad, I was like, how does that happen? Like, how can they be so dysfunctional? And I was like 14 years old at the time. I was like, how can you be so dysfunctional that you didn't know how much money you had?
So this says here, the report affirms a 2013 Reuters series regarding how the Defense Department falsified accounting on a large scale as it scrambled to close its books. I reported this in Shattering Mess. You may recall, Scott, that I said that the U.S. Department of Defense has no accounting system. Mm-hmm. They've spent now billions of dollars trying to establish an accounting system. They don't have one. And so what they do at the end of the year, they just take what they think they spent, and they say this is therefore the amount of our budget, and this is our balance sheet, and we don't have the invoices for it, mind you. We don't have any financial backup for it. We haven't a clue as to how many of anything we actually own. We don't know where those things are. We don't know how much we paid for them. We don't know how much of the inventory that we have on our books is for things that we discontinued and took out of service decades ago. We haven't a clue on any of that. We don't even know how much we have committed to buy that has to be funded in the future. But here we're going to close our books, and we're going to assume that we spent what we were given.
The thing that's really frustrating about that is that the government, that's our money. That's
right.
taken from the people that pay taxes.
Yeah. Can you tell me how being $6.5 trillion off and having no records as to where it was spent, how it was spent, who it went to, how that is a benefit for the United States taxpayer? How we're getting some benefit? Why we should be paying salaries to and saluting and honoring an organization that somehow laundered $6.5 trillion. You know, they used to say a billion there and a billion here, a billion there. Now we're talking about trillions.
Yeah, I was going to say a billion. You might be able to whatever. I mean, they're saying even that's crazy.
Okay,
but,
yeah.
But 6.5 trillion.
Yeah, we do.
How do they spend it? I mean, there's got to be a record of spending it somewhere, even if you don't have a receipt for what you bought. Somebody had to write a check, right? Transfer money some way.
Well, there's got to be somebody to answer for it.
Because they don't have much cash in the world.
You know what? First of all, I'm dumbfounded that America as a whole can't figure out we made a bad situation and worse in Vietnam. We went in a bunch of lies. We made a bad situation worse. We lost 50 to 60,000 Americans actually in a counterproductive way. And we really should learn from that and never do that again. And so, you would have hoped that we were, but then the invasion of Afghanistan was exactly the same thing. We made a bad situation worse. We sacrificed a lot of lives, a lot of money, and we're still there making a bad situation worse. Yeah, it was a bad situation there. It was a situation we created because we created the Taliban back during the Carter administration to go after the Russians, and it backfired, and it created a miserable place for these people to live. But we made it worse. That's why the second most, the highest number of refugees flooding into Europe are from Afghanistan. Mm-hmm. We've made the situation worse for women there, and that's hard to do, considering the way they were mistreated. And then we didn't learn a thing from there, so we invaded Iraq. And oh my God, did we make that country worse? I mean, it's inconceivable that America couldn't recognize how counterproductive our invasion of Iraq was. And then we didn't learn from that. So what do? We bombed Libya out of existence. In exactly the same scenario. And there's no one in their right mind that would view what we did in Libya as sane. And now we're doing the same thing to Syria for the same reason. And no one has put up their arm and said, wait a minute, please don't do that in my name. And the same organization that is responsible for all of that just announced that, oh, by the way, we made a $6.5 trillion accounting error. We don't have any invoices or anything to back up any of it. We don't know where the money went.
Well, it happens, right? We really suffer from the old saying, if all you have is a hammer, everything's a nail. Well, yeah. For us, if all you have is a military, then everything must be a war, right?
It must be a war. Must be a war. And so what we do is we continue to manufacture enemies. It wasn't enough for us to have the Russians as an enemy, so we manufactured an enemy by renting the Taliban from Pakistan and Afghanistan. And then that wasn't enough, so we decided to invade Iraq, and that created the Islamic State. Well, that gave us the opportunity to bomb Syria. Well, that wasn't enough to justify this massive military because, of course, you're using this very sophisticated military to go after sheep herders and camel herders and guys that are intense so that every bomb you drop costs you 1,000 times what you take out. So what we did is we started arming the people we were bombing in Syria with real weapons. So we were supplying their weapons, and then we were bombing those weapons that we created, or that we offered them. And that wasn't even enough, so we decided, why don't we create a scenario in the Ukraine where we create a riot that destroys that government that the Russians and the Ukraine won't go along with, so there'll be a breach, and then we'll say that the Russians are trying to reestablish the Cold War, and we'll give justification for NATO. And we could have the Russians as an enemy again. We need a real military to confront them. And then why don't we start antagonizing the Chinese? Why don't we position our military so that that our guns are pointed towards them? Why don't we challenge their defense zone? even though it's smaller than our defense zone. Because you're going to need a real military to go after the Chinese, right?
You know, there was a military guy, a former high-ranking official in the government, who's retired now, on the radio the other day, and he said exactly what you've said over and over and over again about Russia and China and all. And he says, you know, we can't, right now, there's no way we could invade Russia. We'd be worse off than Napoleon. It wipes us out.
So it wipes us out.
We couldn't even land in China.
Right.
You know, they don't even have to send guns. They can send guys with sticks like they did.
Invading China would be like this myth that there was a revolution in Turkey. Yeah. You know, because all you have to do is count. The country has become a fundamentalist Islamic dictatorship, and so all you had to do is to have somebody say, okay, you Muslims, these guys that are taking over your country, they're secularists, stand out in the street and oppose them. And it was over before it got started. Now you imagine the United States invading China?
Yeah. What could you do?
Oh my God! You mean there is no scenario where we could project a force and invade China, and there's no reason for China to invade the United States. We're their primary market, and they own us.
Well, what he said is we chose there was a doctrine that came up at the fall of the Russian Soviet Union, and he said in that we basically told ourselves that we have unilateral use of anything we want. For talk about ego, unilateral decisions to make whatever we want to make. It doesn't matter. We don't care what the Chinese do. We don't care what the Russians do, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And that's the actual doctrine that they follow for foreign policy. Yeah. We know from WikiLeaks what we did in the Middle East.
Right.
It's like
from WikiLeaks we know that we actually deliberately and knowingly deliberately planned the war that's taking place in Syria now. We instigated it. We armed both sides for the specific purpose of witnessing the carnage we're witnessing, and then we go off and say, well, it's our patriotic duty to go on fight these bastards.
Your patriotic duty to pay taxes to pay off the debt that they borrowed from the money, because they didn't use any real money. That's the debt.
Of course.
Just we're supposed to pay it off.
Right. And the world won't loan us any money. The world won't loan us any money anymore, so we do quantitative easing to create the illusion of funding our debt.
Yeah.
And by the way, you don't have a candidate running for public office that wants to even deal with it. They don't even mention the debt anymore.
No.
So,
that gets in the way of
the economy so strong that they would make, that's the pitch, that you would have so much money left over you could pay off the debt. You can't get out of this hole.
No, you can't get out. No. It was possible 20 years ago when I started writing about it that you'd sell the federal land. That was, essentially to become a state. If you were a western state, you had to cede between 40 and depending on the state, like Alaska, up to 80% of your land. You had to give it to the federal government for the right to become a state. And by the way, the Constitution allows for a new state to voluntarily come into the Union, although we have some like Hawaii that were just confiscated. But there is no procedure for leaving the Union now. So how could you have freedom and you have no procedure whatsoever? Yeah, to withdraw from the Union. But the whole thing is just if it wasn't so deadly, it would be laughable.
Well, that laugh you have, or I have, when everything is so dire, you just have to go.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, they call it the gallows laugh.
Yeah,
that's kind of where we are.
My laugh.
All right, we have been all over the board here, and it's been a long time since we were back in Yahowah, Isaiah. We've covered the first three statements really quite well. The first in Yahowah 1 is Yahowah just saying, here's who I am. Here's who I am in sense of this is the timing in terms of here's the kings of Yehuda during the breadth of my revelation. And then the first statement is not from Yahowah, it's from Yahweh, and Yahweh makes what I consider to be one of the most profound, one of the most important, one of the most insightful statements in the whole of the Torah and prophets. And he says that you were my children. I raised you. I elevated your status. I nurtured you. I cared for you. I helped you grow. And you rejected me. That means that God's view is that man exists for the purpose of the covenant. And you know, I wrote something just about a half an hour ago. I was dealing with Abram at the time. He became Abraham, but Abram at the time, beginning the 15th chapter of Bereshit. And you probably heard me say this a number of times, guys, but Abram turns to Yahowah and says, you know, I don't get it. What are you giving me? I don't have a child. I don't get it. What are you giving me? How am I going to inherit something if I don't even have a child? And what I came to is something really quite profound. It's not just that Abraham didn't understand the symbolism that was being offered to him. For example, the land has nothing to do with Israel and everything to do with Israel in the sense that the land represents Yahweh's home. And so I'm giving you this forever. Well, the earth isn't going to exist forever, so what he's saying is I'm giving you this land as my realm where we're going to live together forever. Represents heaven. So the bottom line here is that the covenant did not exist for the purpose of Abram and Sarai having a child, and later Abraham and Sarah. It wasn't their family. The covenant is not the family of Abraham. It's Yahweh's family.
Yahweh's family, yes.
Yeah. So Abraham, he missed the entire purpose. It wasn't for him to have a kid and for that kid to have an inheritance that Abraham was passing on to him. Yahweh was childless.
Totally different perspective, isn't it?
It was for Yahweh to have a kid. Abraham may have been 90, but Yahweh was offering to adopt he and his wife, and then to give them his inheritance. And the perspective is literally the inverse of what Abraham was viewing. Now, it would be shortly thereafter that Abraham and Sarah would have Yishak. But not because Yishak was and I think I've written this in the past, that Yishak was the first child of the covenant. That's not true. Abraham was the first child of the covenant. Yes, Sarah was the second child of the covenant, and Yishak was the third. But by having Yishak, they modeled the nature of the covenant. That way that Yahweh and Abraham got to enjoy being a father at the same time. Give them something to relate to and to share in common. The joys of being a parent. But he completely missed it. The covenant isn't man's family. It's God's family. So anyway, that sets the tone. So the entire book of Yahshua, I would say, quite simply, the entire Torah, everything God has to say, can be encapsulated in, as your father, I sought to raise you as my children. And I nurtured you, I fed you, I uplifted you, I encouraged you, I made you much greater than you would otherwise be. And you rejected me. So there's no religion there. There's no obedience there. There is simply a family relationship, the covenant. Yahweh's father, not Lord. Certainly not dictator. Saying, that's all that I wanted to do, and I did what I offered, and you rejected it. And what did they reject it for? What did they replace it with? Religion. Yeah, religion. Yeah, religion. Family of man. So then that leads to Yahweh making a statement. It's, a cow knows her maker. A cow, which is the term for cow, is one who is observant. Now, one who is observant knows their maker. And he said even an ass knows its Lord.
And one that doesn't even pay attention, he knows who.
Yeah, an ass and particularly knows his Lord. But Israel, you are so ignorant, so unaware, so oblivious. Your problem is you don't have a clue. Now, from there, this is what God says. So, woe, and you don't want woe. Woe is a bad thing. Woe to an errant and blameworthy nation acting like Gentiles, severely stubborn and heavily laden, dulled and unresponsive, with corruptions and guilt associated with perverted distortions, the offspring of errant, harmful, and evil children who corrupt and destroy, lacking integrity. They have rejected and abandoned Yahowah. That is the first half of the fourth statement in Yahshua. Now, what this says is that perverted distortions, corruptions, a dulled and unresponsive attitude, which is the failure to use our neshama, conscience, the way it was intended. So there are a lot of things that cause the masses to reject and abandon Yahowah. One of them is to place their faith in things which are errant and blameworthy. The second is to be dulled in terms of one's responsiveness, so that you're not processing information. That was the case with this fellow that Larry and James and I were trying to awaken relative to his support of Enoch. Your thought process is dulled and unresponsive, and you're guided by corruptions. Perverted distortions. The Book of Enoch, for example, is a corruption and a perverted distortion. And so when you're unresponsive rationally, when you're wallowing in errant and blameworthy ideas, when you become corrupt with perverted destruction, what God is saying that you become the source of errant and evil children, and that they in turn corrupt and destroy.
Yeah.
Because they lack integrity.
To follow along and reteach it to their children and on and on and on.
Right, and all that leads to rejecting and abandoning Yahowah. Now then he goes on to say, beyond that, he says, they have come to despise, and they actually revile, genuinely feeling contempt for, accordingly, the set-apart one of Yisrael. Individuals engage, and those are the individuals who engage and endure with God, Israel. They have become strangers, alienating themselves, having gone backwards in the wrong direction. So here's this situation. They're steeped in a milieu of errant and blameworthy Gentile ideas. Their ability to think and to be rational, their nasama, their conscience, is dulled and unresponsive. As a result, their entire thought process is corrupt and perverted. Therefore, they give birth to children who are errant and harmful and evil, who then corrupt and destroy because they have been raised in an environment where they lack integrity. They can't tell right from wrong, and that's the environment we live in today. No one can tell right from wrong. And that as a result, they have rejected and abandoned Yahowah. Now, he goes one step further beyond this. And this is the thing that I have said so many times, and I stand by it. I don't think that it's something that is comfortable for people to hear. But Kirk, I don't think it's just a matter that Christians prefer the caricature that they have created based upon Dionysus of their Jesus Christ, their new and improved God. It's not just that they prefer Jesus to Yahowah, that they prefer their Pauline New Testament to the Old Testament.
Right.
They really hate the God of the Old Testament. None of them would admit that, but that's really the idea, because any time you confront them with the Torah, they despise it.
Yeah, this journey I've been on for almost 8.5 years now. I cannot tell you how much they hate you for even challenging their thought process or their faith.
Right.
They turn on you, man. They just can't stand you.
And even if 100% of what you have to say is simply conveying Yahweh's testimony, they will get angry at, hate, despise God's own testimony. So he's right. It's when the religious Jews claim that they're doing all of this for Hashem, and they play the religious dress up, and they're bobbing their heads and their minions with all their rabbinical prayers.
Total BS.
What God is saying is that it's not just that they are misguided. It's not just that they're irrational. It's not just that they lack integrity. He says they really hate me. And that's why they won't say my name. That's why they've replaced my Torah with their Talmud. That's why they decided that they're going to bob their heads up and down in prayer when I've never asked them to pray. Not even listening to it. They hate me.
I read the covenant today. They figured I can't find the prayer and the praise and the worship anywhere.
Oh, you read the 8 or 9 chapters of Barashit that deal with the covenant?
Yeah, it's just
if you know that chapters 9 and 10 of Observations for Our Time, which we're now talking about chapter 6. We got a ways to go to get there. But chapters 9 and 10 turned out unexpectedly to be a complete representation, if you will, of the terms and conditions of the covenant. And it became that because Yahweh's provisions for life at the beginning of Yahowah 3:1 were being withdrawn. And so if Yahweh is going to withdraw his provisions for life, it's rather important to let people know how to get them back. Now, I made I phrased this inaccurately, and Roy corrected me, and to the degree that I still have a legacy of this, I want to make sure that I correct myself. When Yahweh wrote in Yahowah 3:1 that he was withdrawing his provisions for life, he's not changing anything that he has promised us or changing any of the promised benefits of the covenant. If you have accepted the terms and conditions of the covenant, his provisions for life are yours. And it's because Yahweh can't withdraw anything that he has committed to do. By withdrawing his provisions for life from Yahowah, what he's saying is that up to that point, he had done everything he could to draw their attention to his plan. He had sent prophet after prophet. He had communicated with Moshe, with Shemuel, with Dode, with Hezekiah, and then prophet after prophet after prophet. He had done everything he possibly could in Yahowah to draw their attention to this, and he had even protected them from the attack of the Assyrians. But they would have been wiped out. There would have been no Jerusalem had the Assyrians had their way. And so he had worked very hard to do this very thing. And all he's saying is, I'm not going out of my way to offer this to you anymore. It's there in the Torah. Read it, take advantage of it if you want to. But actively offering it and engaging, that's not something I'm going to do for you. And, what I think happened is if you look at Yahowah after that time, of course, they were just taken up and hauled into slavery by Babylon, and then ultimately they were captured by the Greeks, and then harassed by the Romans, and then harassed by the Byzantines, and then harassed by the Muslims, and it just goes on and on, and on and on and on and on. And the only people that Yahweh really went out of his way to help were just individuals. It was not, the nation was not something he reached out to anymore. Yeah. Now it's strictly individuals. So we'll return in a moment. So Kirk, if I'm hearing you correctly, What I'm actually hearing you say is that you've come to the same conclusion that I have. That when you expose the caricature that is become the Jesus Christ of Christianity, and how that caricature is based on Dionysus and has absolutely nothing to do with Yahowah or Yosha or the Torah, which he came out of. That when you present that, and you do so by quoting Yahowah's Torah and prophets and Psalms, that the reaction of Christians is universally rejection, and it's hostile.
Oh yes, yes. They don't speak to you again. Close friends.
Yeah.
People that you've broken bread with.
Right. Right. And while they will
social and business.
Right. And while they'll use the ad hominem argument and blame you. The fact is that you're not citing your opinion.
Yeah.
All you're doing is sharing what Yahowah's words say. And so
you have to take it like Samuel did when Yahowah said, "They ain't rejecting you, Sam."
That's right. That's exactly right. They're not rejecting you, Sam.
They're rejecting me.
They're rejecting me. He says, "Now I still want you to listen to him."
Well, yeah.
Yeah, I want you to listen to him because you're still working with me. You're still associated with me. So I want you to listen to him, but I want you to understand they're not rejecting you. They are rejecting me. And so that is the Christian Jesus is actually a replacement for the God of the Torah because they hate the God of the Torah.
Well, I was a Christian, and I jumped off the bandwagon like right away. I said, "Well, that explains that. Let's stop doing that."
Yeah, that was my view.
Obviously, you took a mighty turn.
Yeah, I mean, I felt a little bit like Abram, and you can see that some of Abram's Babylonian upbringing lingered with him. It took him a while to get rid of it, and I still use the title of the Lord for a short period of time. It took me a while to get that out of my system. I still referred to a renewed covenant. It took me a little while longer to get that out of my system. There are aspects that take you a while to a lot of dirt. Yeah, that doesn't all come off instantaneously. So,
but I didn't get mad at you because you told me so.
Yeah, I know. That's what you think would be a rational thing to do. But today, the principal argument that, how many tens of thousands of letters that I dealt with in Prophet of Doom before I just stopped going to the email to Prophet of Doom because it just became too annoying. But of the tens and thousands of letters that I received, 99.999% of the arguments were ad hominem. If I'm sharing with you what God said, why go after me?
Yeah.
No, I don't care if you do. It doesn't mean anything to me one way or the other.
Well, at least put up a
why do that?
About what you said.
Right.
And
right.
Tell me where I'm wrong.
Right. And if you can do that, great. Let's have a discussion.
I'll listen to you.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah.
That's the word to go on, and I'll straighten me out then.
Okay.
Nobody wants to straighten me out.
Okay. Now, this is what God's saying. I'm trying to straighten you out. It says, for what reason? And on whose account? Do you want to be continually afflicted and destroyed over and over again, associating with and adding to your obstinate and hostile rebellion? The entire head is impaired with disease. The heart, and thus the ability to exercise good judgment, is cramped up and inflamed. I love the term cramped up and inflamed. You know what in Hebrew it conveys? Menstrual cramps.
The menstrual cramps.
Yeah, your brain, or your heart, and thus your ability to exercise good judgment has menstrual cramps.
Yeah, really cramps.
God's got a sense of humor.
Funny, actually.
Yeah. But so he's asking, he says, listen, I've told you I don't want you to be religious. I told you I don't want you to emulate the ways of the Gentile nations. I've told you that what I'm offering you here is a family relationship, no religion allowed. Now, it's really clear in the laying out of the terms and conditions of the covenant. And I said the first thing you got to do is walk away from the babble of politics and religion. First thing you got to do. And then walk to me. And then trust and rely on me as opposed to human institutions. And what are you doing? As he says, for what reason? And on whose account? To continually afflict and destroy yourselves over and over again.
Mm-hmm.
So he's blaming man and corruptions and distortions for not only the antagonism towards God, but their own self-annihilation.
Yeah.
They brought all of this on themselves. You know how many Jews, they talk about the Holocaust and say, why are we so special? Why not somebody else? Why don't you pick somebody else with all this fun? But God's view is, no, you've got to back asswards here, pal.
Yourself. Yeah.
You did it to yourselves. Don't blame me. You did it to yourselves.
Yeah.
I wanted to raise you as my children. You did this to yourselves.
America's doing it to itself.
Yeah.
They're going to have nobody to blame.
Right. So, why are you in obstinate rebellion? The head is impaired with disease. What is the most deadly disease in human history?
The plague
of death, right?
Known as Yahowah.
Yeah, right. Yahowah. Christianity. Yeah, Christianity. Now, it's interesting. I just did a whole analysis of Babel because I was in that 9th chapter. When Yahowah said he's withdrawing the support for life, it was important to present what his support is so that people who are interested in getting it, because now you've got to be proactive, know what it is, where it is, what you need to do, what you need to know. And I was tracing history, the history of Hina, which is the attitude that you have to use to get it back, which means to pay attention, to look up, and to notice what and listen to what God is saying. That's what Hina is all about. And so, as I'm going through all of this, you realize that God has systematically, through Babel, told us what it was that's going to get us into trouble. And as I was studying Babel, one of the things that I learned is that while he says that he balal the language, he says that the problem here is that people were acting overtly religious. They were building religious shrines, and they were deceiving his creation. And so that they were using rhetoric to do these things, and that because of the power of rhetoric with Yahowah's spirit, and they were speaking Hebrew, he says, this is way too influential. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to balal their language.
Confuse it? Yeah.
I'm going to no, actually, balal doesn't mean to confuse. It means to mingle, to commingle, to mix. Okay. Yeah, to mix together.
Yeah.
And by mixing together, then he says that the result of mixing together is going to be Babel. So I'm going to call the place confusion and corruption Babel, based on balal, which is commingling and mixing together. And so I began to think about it, because I got a letter from Lisa, one of our regular listeners, and she was criticizing something that I had said, where I had said that Babel is Christianity. Babylon and Christianity are one and the same. And she looks at Islam as a derivation of Christianity and equally balal. And here's what I shared, and this is in the 9th chapter, and we'll get to it later in observations. Is that Christianity is a commingling. Paul wanted to prevail with Greeks and Romans, and the philosophy and the primary religious concept of Greeks and Romans at the time was Gnosticism. So he not only based his Jesus character on Dionysus, and had him actually quote Dionysus' most famous line, but all the Pauline doctrine, the flesh versus the spirit, that's Gnosticism. So he mixed in Gnosticism with the Dionysus cult, mixing that in. Huge swaths of the Babylonian religion, everything from crosses to the Trinity to a dying and resurrecting God. All of that is part of the Babylonian religion. And so the mix of these things became Christianity. And then if you look at Islam, for example, Islam is a mix of rabbinic Judaism and the pagan religions of the Hanifs in Yemen and the pagans in Mecca. And those, so two pagan cults and bastardized Talmud readings were blended together to create the Quran. And even Judaism is a co-mixing. It takes the Torah and it augments it with the Talmud, which is the arguments of man, mixed together. And it's the mixing of these things that confuses. What God is saying is that it's very difficult to confuse people with an outright lie. But if you mix things together, if you blend the truth and lies together, if you blend man's words and God's words together, then that is the way that people are most easily confused. And that's what he's complaining against here.
Yeah.
So commixing is what leads to confusion. Now, one of the examples is the 9th chapter. I spent 20 pages going through the history of the corruption of the Christian New Testament. And one of the things we learned is that it is based upon mixing together of errant texts.
Right.
So you just take a whole bunch of hopelessly errant texts that are contradictory, and you blend them all together in one new text that is a blend of all of the errant and contradictory texts. And what are you going to get?
Confusion.
Babel, right? Confusion. So God is saying you're confused. You've mixed together all of these pagan Gentile ideas, and the result is you're hopelessly confused. And so he just said your head is impaired with disease. You brought the diseased words and this confusion into your mind, and it's affected your thinking. But there's something worse than something affecting your thinking. And that's the biggest plague today. It's the thing that I see that is the most pervasive today, which is people's judgment being impaired.
Yeah.
And he says your judgment is cramped, it's infirmed. And that's what I witness every day. People can't exercise good judgment. They're incapable of processing information and coming to a reasonable conclusion. So God goes on to say, he says, from the sole of the foot all the way to the top of the head, there is nothing that is healthy or sound.
That's an indictment.
Everything. I mean, from the sole of your foot all the way to the top of your head, you are sick. There's nothing about you that's sound. Emasculated and castrated, slashed, battered, and bruised, with wounds associated with a devastating and deadly plague, which are raw and rotten. They have not been cleansed, nor medicated, and bandaged, not even soothed with olive oil. That is how God was viewing Yahowah. And this opens up addressing Yahowah. You know, a lot of times I remember I had there's a fellow that wrote books that were somewhat accusatory of Islam. And he decided that he would hate on me because I held the rabbis in Yathrib accountable for Islam. I said, you know, had they not recited Talmud stories to Muhammad, sold them Talmud readings, Islam would not exist.
Yeah.
There wasn't enough substance to the pagan mythology of the Meccans and the Hanifs to create a Quran. You had to make anybody beyond those that were plundering on behalf of Muhammad continue to do so. It had been like Genghis Khan and Kublai Khan and Tamerlane. You know, you can have brief periods of time where you can convince people to plunder on your behalf if they get to keep part of the plunder, but after a while it just dissipates, as did the Mongolian raiders. Islam would have faded into oblivion had it not been for the fact that rabbis sold Talmud readings. So, and then he called me for holding them accountable. I mean, because the fact is they did this. The fact is that Islam would not exist today had they not done it. And so he called me anti-Semitic. And I said, well, if I'm anti-Semitic, then Yahowah and Yosha are anti-Semitic because they hold the Yehudim accountable all the time. How could you be more indicting of Yehudim, Jews, than to say from the sole of the foot all the way up to the top of the head there is nothing that is healthy or sound, emasculated, castrated, slashed, battered, and bruised, with wounds associated with a deadly plague, which are raw and rotten. They have not been cleansed or medicated, bandaged, not even soothed with olive oil. I mean, that's a heck of an indictment.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know how you can insult somebody worse.
What more could you say? You just said you're perverted, you're distorted, you're blameworthy, you lack integrity, you can't think, you can't exercise good judgment, you're in wholesale rebellion, you're strangers, and now you're sick from head to toe.
You're a sick dog.
Yeah. So, you know, it is appropriate to hold people accountable.
Uh-huh.
It's appropriate.
Yeah?
Yeah. Yahowah's not being anti-Semitic when he says this. Like, anti-Semitic really means against the name. And Yahowah loves his name. So he most certainly isn't against the name. He was pointing out that they were now against his name.
Yeah. And they were.
And they
making this stuff up.
Yeah, they were. So he says, here's the consequence. Your land will become lifeless and ruined. Your cities and towns will be consumed by fire. Your soil before you will be conspicuously in your presence will be devoured and destroyed by illegitimate, unauthorized, and foreign foes, the most nauseating of horrors. They will bring devastating perversity and adversarial transformations, similar to being overthrown by estranged adversaries. Now, Yahowah said, I wanted to raise you as my family. Yisrael was my home. Now, if you're my family, I'm going to protect you. I'm going to, it's one of the first promises Yahowah made to Abram. If you want to be my kid, then it's my responsibility to create and to protect you and to shelter you in my home. It's my job. It's my job to nurture you. It's my job to take care of you. But if you want to go off on your own, it's your responsibility if you want to go off on your own. Good luck with that. And they did. And he says, here's the consequence. You aren't so good at it. I'm really good at it. You aren't so good at it.
No.
That's
by everybody on the block.
All right. Now, God still says, and this is in my view, the answer to the point that Roy offered as criticism, and he was, he's nice about it. He just said, you didn't convey this accurately, and he was right, I didn't. But this is Yahowah's way of saying that, yes, I'm withdrawing my means of supporting life from you, but I'm still going to leave some signs along the way, so that those who are willing to read them will know where to find me. And he says, but the daughter of Zion, the conspicuous signs posted to mark the way, will be preserved and left as a reminder. It will be like a sheltered place for living in a vineyard, like an overnight cottage for a watchman in a challenging, ill-treated garden filled with vehemently difficult stubble and chaff, like an awkward encampment preserved by the observant. I view the Torah as that today. I view Dode's Mizmor Psalms as that today.
Anything else?
Yeah. They all exist as a sign posted along the way.
Right.
They're conspicuous, and if you want to read them, they're there. But they're only there if you're willing to be observant.
Right.
Then he says, unless Yahowah of the host of spiritual messengers had not spared and preserved a remnant on our behalf. This is actually now Yahshua throwing in his 2 cents, which is really important. That's one of the neat things about Yahowah's prophets, is that while God speaks through them and he speaks in first person, occasionally, you hear their voice. As they're listening along. It's participatory. It's like Chaba Ook listening to or seeing what God was revealing about the plague of death that is Paul, and finally saying, what in the world is wrong with him? You can't die? What are you talking about? God died. He's just looking, are they out of their mind?
Yeah.
Are they out of their mind? Well, so this is, unless Yahowah of the host of spiritual messengers had not spared and preserved a remnant on our behalf, as a few survivors, then like Sodom, scorched and burning, we would have been. Approaching Gomorrah, a tyrannically manipulated, depressed habitation, we'd be likened and compared. I've seen the ruins of Sodom and Gomorrah. You can see them from the area around Qumran. You can see them as you go down the mountain on the east side of Jerusalem, and you look out in the desert at the shores of the Dead Sea. The mounds that were once buildings are there, and there are those who has actually picked up. Then you can even today. I've seen the brimstone. I've seen these peeps of that brimstone, that are round brimstone, that are sulfur, that are like hailstones of sulfur, and you light them, and the heat is so intense that it'll melt whatever kind of like a device you're holding it in, and it burns with this intense blue heat. Now, I've seen what he did, and he's saying, you'd have brought that on yourself, and that's what you'd be. So, he did leave a remnant, and he left that remnant specifically for that person.
Yeah.
Now, this goes on from there, Kirk, and it really gets interesting. At this point, God just is very specific, talking about the consequence here of religion, and what the alternative is, because he wants to say, all right, this is what we've got. I want to make sure that you understand there's an alternative here. Choose to listen to the word of Yahowah, leaders of the scorched and burning, and listen intently, perceiving what is said, and then respond appropriately to the Torah teaching of our God, you people of the tyrannical, manipulated, and depressed habitation. So there's a way out of Sodom.
Mm-hmm.
There's a way out of Gomorrah.
Right.
And that way is observing the Torah, right?
Yeah, you find your answers there.
Yeah. This particular Satan, rather than using Shamar, observe, he's using Shama, listen.
Shama, listen to the words.
Right. So recite the words and listen to them. But he's saying that, you've devastated yourself. Here's the consequence of everything you have done to yourself, and here's the solution. I left you those signs, the Zion, that point the way, because what are they pointing the way to?
Back to him.
Yeah, through the
Zion.
The Torah. Through the Torah. Yeah, Zion is a sign
to
the Torah, right. That's why the living embodiment of Zion, who is Dode, wrote so many marvelous psalms telling us how to observe and benefit from the Torah.
Yeah.
And so the Torah is the answer, and then he says, okay, back to you guys. By what means, so since my Torah is the means to approach me, he's asking these religious people, so by what means do you think I can be approached by the great multitude, the exalted aspects, even the rabbinic nature of your sacrifices, asked Yahowah.
All right.
I have literally and actually fulfilled, satisfied and completed the uplifting offerings to rise, I should say, associated with the male lambs. Mm-hmm. In addition, the lipid tissue, the fatty tissue of overfed fatlings and the blood of bulls, lambs, and goats, I do not want and I do not desire. I'm having you pour that out on the ground. I don't want it. And I'm not hungry. It's symbolic for you. But you don't get it. So here's their religious...
These are the Christians. I mean, you've seen the way they write it.
They're trying to condemn Judaism in this. Yeah. As a matter of fact, that Wayne World, the guy that is the great prophet for Enoch, he has the same issue. He actually cites Yashayah 1:11 and 12 or even 1:11, 12, and 13 to say, see, he is condemning you, me, us.
Well, but that's so illogical. If Yah was condemning these people and us, why is he pointing right back to solve it? He obviously wants them to come
the
back.
Torah.
Or he wouldn't
the Torah, right? That's correct.
Just like you're not wasting your time with Wayne World.
Right.
He's and his solution was he just stated was pointing right back to the Torah, the original that I made with him. What's wrong with him?
Yeah. He's not saying that I've had my fill of my invitations to meet. My mikveh. I'm not saying I've had my. Says I'm not having my fill of mine. I've had my fill of yours.
Yeah.
I've had more than enough of yours. He didn't say I've had it, that I'm ending mine. No. It's yours that's the problem. And what was yours at the time? Yours at the time wasn't Judaism, and that's what Christians would say. See, he is rejecting Judaism here.
It couldn't have been.
No, because Judaism didn't even exist then. This is right around 745 BCE Rabbinic Judaism, the Judaism that we know today, didn't come to exist until around 100 to 150 BCE.
Or 200 BC is what I was trying to say.
Yeah, and it really didn't come into fruition until right around the time of Rabbi Akiba. Rabbi Akiba is the one that finally broke through, because the Judaism, during the time of the Maccabees, you had not only a rebellion against the Greeks, but also a rebellion between the two groups of Yehudim, where one group wanted to pick their priest based upon their own preferences, and the other said, no, the priest has to come from the Lowy, and that's God's instructions. And the other one says, no, we want to pick the priest. And so you had this fight between the two of them, and the Maccabees, the ones who wanted to impose their own priest, ultimately prevailed, and that ultimately drilled down to this fight between the Sadducees and the Pharisees. And this union between the Sadducees and the Pharisees, and even the scribes to some extent, which were either liberal political types or conservative religious types, it wasn't finally resolved until Rabbi Akiba. And resolved is not a good thing here. But Rabbi Akiba, from a rhetoric point of view, he not only brought Rome on to galvanize people's allegiance and PO'd Rome so that Hadrian came in with, and devastated the place, but he made certain that there would only be one form of Judaism, his form, rabbinical Judaism, and it was born really in 133 CE. Long history lesson to say that in 745 BCE, when Yahowah was saying, your festivals, the multitude of your sacrifices and prayers and all the things that you're bringing, and your lambs and your overfed cattle, all that kind of stuff, I am detesting. That had nothing to do with Judaism. And at the time, the influence in the land, because Yahowah makes it very clear, he's talking about Astarte, the queen of heaven, the mother of God, and of the Lord of Baal. They had adopted the Babylonian religion. Mm-hmm. And so today, if you were to look at what is the closest analog to the Babylonian religion, the religion they were practicing and therefore God was condemning, it's Christianity.
Yeah. And the history books bear that out.
Of course. Christmas and Easter, Babylonian holidays.
It's not like you're making this stuff up.
Yeah, Christmas and Easter, Babylonian holidays. Sunday worship, Babylonian. The Trinity, Babylonian. Churches and steeples, Babylonian. The Mass, Babylonian. The Eucharist, Babylonian. The notion of a paid clergy, Babylonian. It just goes on and on and on and on and on and on. A dying and resurrecting God, Babylonian. God's not born, he doesn't die, and he's not resurrected bodily. And so all of that is Babylonian, holy water, getting down on your knees to pray. Every bit of it's Babylonian. Even the Bible is based on the basis of Babylon, which is Babel.
Yeah, being with Baal.
Yeah, same word, being with Baal. Yeah, the Lord is synonymous with both of them. So that's the religion that God is condemning here. If you're a Christian, he's condemning you. So by what means do you think that I can be approached by the great multitude, exalted aspects of your sacrifices? Asked Yahowah. I have literally and actually fulfilled, satisfied, and completed the uplifting offerings to rise associated with the male lambs. He's speaking in advance here, but he's already made the promise to Abraham. Abraham became part of the covenant. And he says, "Here, see the lamb, the ram right there? That's the one. That's me. I'm doing this for you. I'm the living embodiment of the sacrificial lamb." And he spoke of doing this. He will speak of doing this, and specifically how he's going to do it later in Yahowah. And because he's not constrained by time, the fact that he actually fulfilled this in year 4000 Yah and is speaking, and around 777 years before he's going to fulfill it. From God's point of view, he's already done it. And so he says, I've already done that part, and the rest of this blood of lambs and goats and all that sort of things, I don't want, and I don't desire it either.
Yeah, he didn't even ask you to sacrifice.